Hey guys, Kyle from Pixelwave, and today we're going to play with V-Ray materials. So, let's just jump right in. Got a bunch of examples here. Let's just start. Up here, Material Editor. Click and hold it. You got two options. You have what I am most comfortable with is the Material Editor. If we get rid of that and click this, there is a Slate Editor that they call it. Slate Editor, this actually, let me back up. Both do the same thing. This is a node-based workflow. So you can drag in stuff and then start connecting maps up, and it works similar to this. So for those of you guys that are familiar with something like Substance Designer, this might be a little more comfortable for you. The same principles apply. However, I've just been using Material Editor for the last years, and I just find it's fast. It's easy for me. So I'm going to stick with this. Again, nothing wrong with the Slate. They do the same thing. It's both same difference. Okay, options, cycling through this. This is another big thing. I think it's stock. It comes real massive like this. I like to use the 3x2. Reason why is every time I pull up the Material Editor, especially if you're using texture maps from something like Substance Painter, it has to load every single one of these materials. And you just sit there and wait. And it's loading. When you have less materials for it to load all in one shot like this, it's just quick and easy to grab, replace materials, keep things moving pretty quickly. So another thing I want to talk about, me screwing over a bunch of artists constantly while I was new in Max. Maya was my first language. I moved over to Max 2013, 14, working at an architectural firm with V-Ray. Big thing here. The difference, or I think why people use this layout that's like so massive, is they're afraid of switching materials out of these slots. So let's say I created this material here. They don't know how to get another material without overwriting it, or they're afraid they're going to like mess that material up. So let me show you how to do that. There's two buttons where you need to be really cognizant of. Get material, and then this VRayMtl button here. This button grabs a completely new material for you to work on, where this button swaps out, I would say, a material that is already applied to something. So how do we know something is applied? How do we know we're switching something out or getting a new material? These triangled corners are what show us whether or not a material is in the scene and whether or not we've selected that object that has that material. So I'll tell you that these two objects here have this material in the corner. When I select these two, these triangles get lit up, or they're filled in, I guess you could say. When I deselect this, the triangles are still there, indicating that the material is still in the scene. However, when they're not filled in, it just means we don't have the object selected. So when I go to get a new material, that just backshelves this material here and allows us to work on a new material. So if I just say get material, and we're going to get a brand new V-Ray material. This is under, so if this is all locked up like this, materials under the V-Ray tab, not the standard tab, because that's just standard V-Ray materials for something like Scanline. Under the V-Ray rollout tab, we get a new V-Ray material. This is completely stock. Nothing's been applied, nothing's been changed. If you notice, the triangles aren't in the corner, which means this has not been applied to the scene. So as soon as I grab these guys, there's this button here that says assign to selection. Pow, hit that. We have these selected, so the triangles are filled in. As soon as I click off of it, triangles are no longer filled in. Again, this material is in our scene. We do not have the objects selected. I hope that clears that up. How do we apply, again, this is this button here. What other good buttons that I use a lot? If I double click on a material, we can see it. If I click this little checkerboard, we can see its reflection properties. That might look a little better here. Let's see if I get rid of this one. You can kind of see how this is reflecting a little better because it projects this color onto it. So if you guys look right here, a little red spot pops in and out. So you can kind of start seeing the checkerboard come in. I usually leave this checkerboard on because I like to see how the material is reflecting while I'm working on it. Anything else that I use? A lot of this other stuff I don't really use on a day-to-day basis. Go to parent, going forward to sibling. you can kind of see how we use that. Maybe I'll see if I can remember to touch upon that in this video. Actually, I'll show you now. So we have this leaf material where we're going to be putting nodes and type of nodes and type of nodes. If I want to get back to this parent node, if I go in here, I can get back by saying go to parent. Yeah, so that's kind of that. Let's just dive in and start creating materials. Oh, I forgot to mention. So that's to get a new material. What if I want to replace the material that's on here? We use this button here. So long story short, I know I digress. This is where I was screwing over artists at the architectural firm I was working on. Instead of getting a new material and working on a new material, I was replacing materials. So we'd go to render and there'd be like, I don't know, a TV texture on railings, or yeah, like a TV texture on a walkway or something. So let's say I want to replace the material that's here. If I click this and I grab a new material, it's now replaced this. So let's say I turn this red. There you go. So again, to show you, maybe this is more dramatic because it's red now. If I go and I want to replace the material that's on here, we click this button, grab a new material, and it replaces it. So the difference between working on a new material and grabbing or replacing a material that's already been applied. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's just get into everything that's on here. This is probably more than you guys wanted to know. Diffuse is the color of the object. Nothing more than that. Pretty simple. We can pipe maps in here. Let's grab this guy. So if I click this button, show shaded material in viewport, it applies it. Now, how it applies it to this is what's considered UVing. That's for another video, but we can get into that another time. Roughness. This supposedly is supposed to make everything look more matte. It doesn't. I don't know. VRay talks about it in their documentation, which has been upgraded. If you guys haven't seen it in a while or haven't been to Chaos Group's documentation in a bit, it has come along. I know it's been kind of poor for a long time. Let's just say I hit 1, turn it up to a value of 1. I don't see much of a change. To be frank, I don't ever use this. This got integrated with VRay Next in the PBR workflow. I literally just leave that at 0. If you guys want to play with something that looks a little more matte, even though there's a whole reflection section to do that in, you can play with that there. Let me stop this. Reflection. So let's get into this. This is no, it's not black or white only. This can be color. Generally, we use color in here when we're talking about metals. We're going to be creating some textures in this course. So I'll show you kind of how we use that. If you notice the box, let's just make this a color. I'm going to clear this. So since we piped a map in here, you can just right click and say clear, gets back to normal. If I go and I turn this to a color, so this is the color of the reflection. This can be anything. So I can click, make it green. I can make it blue. You know, we can make it whatever we want. That is the intensity of the reflection to some degree, and then the color of that, basically. Let's just say it's the color of it. So if it's black, you're not really going to see black, but the closer we get to white, or let's just say this value slider, the more we're going to see that. Obviously, if you put red on there, you still see it. It's not as apparent, I would say. Moving on, glossiness. So how fuzzy this is. If I say 0.5, this is halfway between mirror and super matte. So if I do that, you kind of get some sheen. You get some nice kind of edge reflections, kind of more matte. If I do like 0.8, you kind of get a nice reflection, but it's a little fuzzy, right? It's not super clear. 1 is mirror-like. So that's that. If I just turn this to black to show you guys, you know, it's going to be super reflective, really hardcore reflective. Now, Fresnel reflections. What this is, and maybe I can show you this best on a sphere, is when something's at a glancing angle. So let's say the side of this cylinder here, it's going to be far more reflective than the center of this face, this cylinder that's pointing back at you, right? The best way to look at this, or the best example of this, is let's say you're standing on a hardwood floor and you're looking down like a corridor with hardwood. You can see the reflection real well. But when you look down, the reflection kind of goes away. That's the Fresnel effect. Now, everything in life has a Fresnel fall off. How hardcore that fall off is just depends on the material itself. What we can do though is by default, this is locked. This 1.6 value is locked to this refraction area, which is kind of everything that covers glass and water and things of that nature. If I want to change this, let me kick this on again. All we have to do is untick this box, and then we can control how intense this fall off is, or how reflective something is. So if I uncheck this, which unlocks this for me now, I say I do something like 20. This is going to give us a metallic look. So everything has an IOR. There's actually charts out there. Like here, I'm just going to Google IOR values. There's like crazy charts that people have on this kind of stuff. I'll put a link to this. I'll save this. Of certain things, like asphalt has an IOR of 1.6. You know, like glass, whether this is reflection or refraction, two different IORs potentially. But yeah, so we can search these. If we have something like glass, we can just find glass, and it gives us the IOR values of that. So 1.5, I think like water is 1.43. You just kind of get used to some of these materials because we create a lot of these. I'll put a link to this in the description. Let me go ahead and curb that for us. All right, so that's Fresnel. Everything has Fresnel. I never turn this off. You can if you artistically like what that does for you. But if we're going for photorealistic, that's always going to be on, and this is going to be switched, you know, between certain values. The higher you go, the more reflective. The lower you go, the less reflective it is. I think 1 is just kind of flat, I guess. All right, moving on. Max depth. I've got an example of this. Basically, it's how many times we're going to be able to see reflections and reflections and reflections and reflections. The best way to explain this, which I'll explain later, is in a mirror. How many times you see a mirror like bounce back and forth. So you see the other mirror, and it's just like tunnel effect where it's just infinite. We can calculate almost infinicy, if that's a word, infinite amount of reflections. This is how we control it. The further we can see those, the more bounces we have, the more rendering computational power we need for that. So it's capped at 5 to just kind of keep things running smoothly within V-Ray. You generally don't switch it or don't need to, unless you just need more bounces. If you had a lot of wine glasses sitting out, that's a time where you might want to increase that. But we'll come back to that. Reflect on backside. That's kind of more in a refraction kind of setting, or I think should be more in refraction. Refraction, again, is like glass type attributes. But that kind of happens. I see this a lot. Like I was working for a client and we had a partition, a cubicle, and then like a partition wall that's like kind of half high. So it was fuzzy walls and then glass kind of going up. And there's some sort of coating on it. I think it's meant for like shatterproof type stuff where I could see reflections. It reflected not only on the side that was looking at me, but then on the back side as well. So certain materials sometimes will want to reflect not only on the front side facing us, but on the back side as well. That's how you do that. Dim distance is basically a cutoff for reflections and the distance within that. I never really touch it. I always want reflections all the time. I want infinite reflections as much as I can. So I never cut that off. I never use that. If you want, you can set a fall off for how far this is going to cut off reflections or not. So I don't use it. For those of you that want to play with that, it's kind of like a clipping plane. You can do that. Subdivs is locked. V-Ray Next calculates its own subdivisions. For those of you that have been using V-Ray a while, kind of understand how mind-blowing Grant Warwick's V-Ray optimization videos were back in the day. Yeah, we don't do that anymore. We don't have to. And then lastly, in the reflections area is effect channels. I find this is more important in refraction. So if I want to see through glass to put like a plane, an image behind it, if I want to do some photoshopping or compositing and I want to be able to see through the glass, that's when I would use it here, effect channels. You can do this as well where it'll punch out the alpha. Let's just show you. I don't know why I'm talking about this. It'll punch out the alpha and it's odd. It adds transparency to the object through reflections. I don't know when you'd want to do this. I've never done it in the 8 years I've been doing CG. Doesn't mean that someone might not want to. But can I get this to stand out a little more? Let's see. If I turn the IOR up to make it more reflective. Yeah, see? So then when I save this out, let's say as a PNG, this is the top part's gonna look transparent, right? So this area is gonna look transparent. This isn't. I don't know why someone would want to use that. Hey, if you use it, tell me in the comments. I don't know. Educate us all. Maybe there's some cool gaming workflow. And then all channels in this will affect, let's say if we have a bunch of render passes, it would punch out a lot of the render passes. When I use this, I do not use it in Reflect. I use it in Refract, and we'll cover that later. I'm going to show a bunch of examples of creating materials. So bear with me. I'm just trying to get through a lot of this, and then we'll show real world examples of this stuff. Refract is next. That is water, glass, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and we'll keep this. Yeah, let's keep that black. We'll just turn this up. So this is going to give us a glass look. And you can see in the viewport, it starts to update. So if I kick this back down, you can kind of start seeing how it's looking a little glassy. So let me kick this back up. We'll take a look at this. So refract, this doesn't have to be a black and white value like reflection. It can be colored. So let me kick this back down so we see. There you go. So it can be colored. Like I can type in, or I can kick in red in this, right? However, I like to do colored glass in the fog area. So I tend to use this as a black and white value. If it's more black, it's less translucent. Can't see through it as well. Then if we kick it up and it starts getting clearer and clearer. So white is just straight up like crystal clear glass. That's that. And we'll cover fog here in a sec. Glossiness is like frosted glass. I don't know if you guys know those like 80s tiles they have back in the day on things like showers, where you can kind of see the figure behind it, but it's all frosted. That's where we'd punch this in. So if I say like 0.8, it looks frosted to some extent. Excuse me. Yeah, see that? Let's see if I clear that out. Let's do something not so crazy. Kind of makes more sense. Yeah, there you go. So this could be cool. We can actually use maps. So glossiness, similarly to glossiness up here, it is a black and white value. So white is 1, black is 0. So what 1 does here is it makes it super clear, and 0 makes it not clear, completely frosted, almost like it's not even glass at all. So what you can do is in Photoshop, maybe let's say have the rest of the glass, the background like at white, and then do a gray value for the text, like 50% gray, and it would frost the text and then leave the rest of it super clear, like frosted text on glass. So that can be controlled with maps, which is pretty cool. The same thing with reflect. Everything that has a box on kind of the right of it can be controlled with a node or a texture map. So if I kick this back to 1, just to show you, IOR, same deal as reflection, but this is Refraction IOR. So again, there's that list, and I'll put it in the description. Something like, I think it's glass or water is 1.43. That just helps kind of push realism. 1, you don't really see anything other than reflection. Refraction is when you put a pencil in water and you see the pencil, when it hits the water line, it like splits. Or when you have a full glass of water, it like warps or distorts the image. That's what IOR is. So we want to be cognizant, we want to be super cognizant of our IOR, especially with glasses, and how it's warping the object. Because like a glass sphere versus an empty glass is going to be quite different. It's going to look quite different. So that's kind of where we control that. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this. Ebe number? I don't know. This makes that kind of Pink Floyd effect without the caustics. It takes the glass, what happens in glass, or when you look at a picture of, let's say, a diamond, you get like speckles of color in there. Can I see that in here? So we got a little bit of it here. You get these speckles of color. It like breaks up the reflection. So it's not just white and black. You get this like gradient of color coming through. And again, the best use case scenario I would see is if you were doing like a wine glass really up close, it would be great for that. Diamonds, it'd be great for that. The higher the number, the less you see it, but the more accurate it is. But again, that's one of those calls where I want to see the that like color speck in there. So if I crank this down to like 20, it'll give us more of that color, which technically isn't photorealistic. But again, if you're doing something stylized, or if you want to try to break that rule to get more color out of this, see how we're getting more color in there now? Yeah, I'll show you more examples. I've got a torus knot that's all twisted, and we'll get better color out of that. Oh yeah, here you go. So some of this stuff, this is gorgeous. It's not on by default, and it does take a lot longer to render, and I think that's why. So see some of this color in here? It just ups the realism with glass. So that's what that is. Max depth for refraction is the same like reflection. So how many times is a ray going through a side of glass? How many times it's going to go through before it just turns black? So if I had a row of glass, which I'll show you, it's going to go through so many different sides of the glass before it just stops, because it doesn't want to keep calculating and get hung up on a certain area. So we control that with that. I'll come back to that. And actually, let me define what a side of glass is, because this is something that was kind of interesting to me. Here, something like this. Let me screenshot this. So when a ray goes out, it hits the front side of this. That's one. That's one of the max depth here, already gone. And then it's going to hit, so the front side, then it's going to hit the back side, that's 2. It's going to hit the front side here, or the inside of the glass, that's 3. Then it's going to hit the back side of this glass, that's 4. That's already 4 rays we've cut through. So when you have two glasses sitting up against each other, it's going to stop. If I had another glass like this out up here, it's going to hit this glass, and the ray is going to stop. It's not going to give us any more information after that. Now, sometimes that's fine. It looks fine. If it's like off in the corner, a bunch of glasses stacked on a shelf, you don't need the rest of that information. But if it's like a hero shot where you have glass on a bar top with more glasses hanging in the back, like you may want more of that detail. So this is going to up the detail in refraction in glass. It's something you just want to play with. It's capping it is not photorealistic, but it could be a design choice whether or not you want to up it, or you can up it due to like rendering time and costs. That's another thing where if you up it, it's going to increase render times as well. All right, moving on. Effect shadows. I can't show you that now. Yeah, let's come back to that. That's basically if this glass is colored. If I was to color this, the shadow of the glass would be red as well if this was red. This also affects caustics. So let's come back to that. That's basically, again, is the color going to come up in the shadow? If this is a red glass, are you going to get kind of a red shadow on the ground? BRB. Effect channels. So again, like we were talking about with, is this the camera? Yeah. Like we were talking about with reflection. Let's say I have a window. I've got glass in the window. If this is color only, I can't see through that glass in my alpha. So let's see this. Let's say I wanted to put something behind this piece of glass in Photoshop. If I hit play on this, we'll let this load up. And we look at the alpha, it's going to be solid. I can't use this information now in Photoshop to slide something behind that. We fix that with this. So if I say color and alpha, this is going to not only affect the color channel, the beauty pass, but also the alpha channel as well. So if I fix this up, there you go. So let me actually cut this to proper, and this is why we don't add color in the refract. If I go to clear, if I go super clear, there you go. So now in our alpha channel, we get the information to cut out behind this. What this line is obviously is the horizon for the ground. So if I was to just delete this, we now get clear information that if I save this out as a PNG in Photoshop, I can then slide stuff behind it That looks kind of cool. So stop this. Let me get our ground back. So again, we can, if we're using render passes, have it affect all the render passes. I tend not to use this. I tend to just use color and alpha only. But if, let's say if there's another channel you want to affect, like Z depth, I don't know why, that would be where you mess with that. Fog color. So again, if I put this back and I show you guys, this is why you don't necessarily want to use color in the the refract section is, I mean, it screws with our alpha channel. I don't know why it does that. So let's use black and white in this only. Let's say that for now. And then if I want to make this glass colored, so it was, if I go back, it was red, right? If I want to make this red, we're going to use fog color. So if I kick that up to red, same kind of deal. We just have more control in fog color. One thing I noticed though, we have fog multiplier. So how dense it's going to make the plastic look, or I'm sorry, I guess it could be plastic or glass, anything clear. Fog multiplier turns the look of this up, so it makes it darker, right? So if I kick this up to 10, so it's going to saturate, make darker, like maybe if you wanted a beer bottle, like something like this would be kind of cool. Yeah, no, something like that maybe. The problem is if I kick this value slider up to 100%, it negates the fog multiplier. Why that happens, I don't know. I don't know if that's a V-Ray thing. Like if I go to 100, something crazy, still the same color. I don't get it. So don't ever go solid. Don't ever go, I would say 255 in the value, 100%. I would kind of keep it down or come close to. Now if I go back to 1, we see that color again. The value of the fog color also affects kind of like the multiplier does. So if you have this real low, you know, your fog multiplier could be at 1, but you're still not seeing the color. So the value kind of controls that as well. So watch out. You could be like adding dark onto dark, and that's why you're not seeing color. Fog bias shows, let's say, like a thin piece of glass you can see through, but then when it's real thick, it gets dark. I'll show you that in an example. That's where we're going to control that. So thicker pieces of glass will be darker, thinner pieces of glass will be lighter, like a wine glass. I guess that's the best way I can put that. All right, so that's that. Translucency, I think, is antiquated. We have shaders now for translucency. And when they say translucency, I've got my cell phone here, they're talking kind of like subsurface scattering, like the options in here, wax, water, you know, we have refract for that. Wax, we have subsurface scattering for that. And then this hybrid model, which kind of is like a look of both of them. I've got a candle we'll look at together. But it's like this effect here. The light going through my hand, this is controlled now through subsurface scattering, not controlled through translucency. So I don't use this. We'll cover it briefly, but I don't, it's antiquated in my mind. Moving on. That's all I'll kind of spend on that. And again, we'll cover some more of it. Self-illumination. That's kind of like a backlit advertisement in a mall that you walk by, you know? It's got some ad for shoes and it's like projecting light out. You can do that with self-illumination. So actually, while I was kind of getting the curriculum set up, I created this guy. So actually, no, I want you guys to see it. So let's go back to this guy. What I'll do is, let's say we want to do a texture that's like glowing. Let me go ahead and kick this to white, kick that up. And I'm going to take this back. We'll create this again. Maybe I'll just create it now and we'll be done with it. But I'm going to put this image, here we go, this guy here. So it's a picture, the color, right? And then I'm also going to move it into self-illumination. And we'll say instance. So any changes I make to the map will be in both of those slots. If now look at no little dog ears, triangles. This material has not been applied in this scene. If I grab both of these, click assign material to selection, boom, in the scene. So if I look at this, not much is going to happen. I'll show you guys why. With the way my camera settings are, This technically, if it was like an indoor shot, would be glowing already. It's kind of set up as an outdoor shot. So if I turn up the multiplier, something crazy, now this is a little nuts, boom, you get that glow. So this is kind of this, again, self-illumination, or if you guys are in the gaming industry, emissive. This is kind of like an emissive value. Get that glow out of that. So a lot of TV screens and things that I do, I'll do this for clients. If I put it in Diffuse as well, they can see it, you know, the screenshot, if I'm doing screenshots prior to renders. And then things that I use a lot, if I go back down to 1 and I say compensate for camera exposure, since my exposure is set up for like an outdoor scene and the lens isn't very sensitive to light, I have to crank this up to 100. I never use 100. I always just go compensate for camera exposure, and it gives you a decent kind of glow. And then you only have to move this to like 2. 5 max is like 100, you know, because it's taking into consideration that you have a lens that's like facing out, or it's not super sensitive to light. So I'll use that button a lot. I'll use, you know, value of 1 or 2. It also works with lens effects. So this bloom, you'll notice with things that are real bright, like if I crank this as something crazy, it'll glow. It'll create like a bloom effect when using lens effects, which I guess is another video we can cover. Okay, what else in that? Oh, GI. So this will also create GI, which is killer. Again, this is something like a mall advertisement, you know, throwing light. If someone's standing in front, they'll have this blue light in front of them that's being cast on them. So that's that. BRDFs. This is reflections. It affects reflections. So let me kill this. So if I right click on the map that I piped in there and say clear, it gets rid of that. And we got to clear it on self-illumination as well. And it gets us back to this. So GGX is the most photorealistic fall off that we have to date. It's the most physically accurate, I would say. So if we look at this material and I say, actually, let me turn this off. Oh, it's sucking up power. Okay. If I go 0.95, we have this highlight, right? And then the highlight falls off. We didn't used to have this a few years ago. When I started in 2012, we only had Fong, Blinn, Ward. Again, if you saw Grant Warwick's stuff, he would do like V-Ray blend materials. And this is an advanced kind of user case scenario that I'm going to go into in part 2. So we're going to start with part 1 here with basics. We'll cover this stuff later. But if I change this to Fong, you just get this little tight BB. Like, boop. That doesn't look photorealistic. Blinn, these just kind of, again, maybe a little softer than Fong. Ward was like a brushed metal kind of feel to it. Yeah, we don't use these anymore. So GGX, if you guys buy old models, always check that. A lot of times they'll leave it on older BRDFs BRDFs, just so that it's compatible with more versions of V-Ray, because not everyone has Next. It hasn't jumped on that. So always check that. Always switch it over. You're going to get a more realistic fall off. And you can control how BB this is or how spread out this is. So if I go to 1.5, you'll notice it's going to pop out. If I go to 1, it's going to pop even more, right? If I go to 3, it's going to get closed up, BB. So we can control the fall off. And this is like with metals or plastics. We can get like really nitpicky with this stuff. I don't want to gloss over this, but I will. Use roughness. This is if you're using a PBR workflow. Generally for someone who's using something like Substance Planar, who has texture maps they want to pipe in, but have taken it as a PBR or exported PBR textures. You guys can check out the video on setting that up. I cover, I guess, from Substance to V-Ray, I cover how to set the maps up in a PBR workflow. And I'll try to link to that in this video. Moving along. I know this is like everything you wanted to not know about materials. Anisotropy. This is that brushed metal look. So like a spray can or spray paint, how it's got that brushed look, I guess. You see it a lot like in bathrooms and materials for arc viz, where someone's, you know, taking some sort of like circular brush and kind of mess with it. So this is a value between 0 and 1. If you go to 1, it doesn't do anything. But if I go to 0.99, it like brushes the heck out of it. So values that we generally more or less see in real life scenarios are like 0.6. So this is going to start making a little more sense. If I was to, let's say, make this more metal-like, yeah, and then let's just kick this down to like 0.8. So this is looking more like what we're used to seeing. See, 0.7 is a little more. So that's starting to look more like what you'd see, bathroom stall. Sorry, it's a bad example. Better example, kitchen sink. Ah, there you go. And then the rotation of this. This is a 0 to 360 value. I know some of these are like random, like, why isn't that a 0 to 360 value? I don't know. So rotation, at least that's easy to remember. So if I say 45, it's going to pop it at a 45-degree angle. We get it like that. Local axis controls the anisotropy and how that's reacting with our object in 3D space. So if I go to X, it'll go like left and right. Oh, actually here, if I kick this down to 0, it'll go left and right. Ooh, up and down. Made a liar. Is this one left and right? No. So that'd be like at the end of a pot. If you have a pot on its side, getting something like that. And, oh, Z is our left to right. Okay. X is up and down in this case. So that's that. Lastly, before we get to examples, there's a lot that's down here. I don't touch any of this. I really don't. I don't even know what the heck it is. So one thing I did want to show you guys is opacity mode. A lot of people don't know about this. This is kind of hidden, but I want to go over this because for those of us who are using force pack, tons of trees outside, this affects how a material renders an opacity map. So let's say you have, I'm going to show you an example of a leaf that's got an opacity map on it. Normal is going to be like the best kind of case scenario where it'll render the edge of the opacity map. The edge of the leaf is going to be like super crisp, super clear. It's going to look more realistic, but it's going to take a really long time to render. Clip is going to be like the quick and dirty way to do something. So if you are pressed for time, switch this over to clip. You can save, like in a small test render with VRay, they saved like 30 seconds, but that was like of this little section of a tree. Imagine if you had a forest. Clip might be able to help you out. And then this stochastic, is that how you guys say that? Stochastic, kind of like the in-between. This is the default. It's going to render well. It's just not going to render as fast and quick and dirty as clip. And then it's not going to be as good but long as normal. So it's kind of your middle ground, and I think that's why it's stock. So let's put this to use. Enough talking. Let me show you real world scenarios of this stuff. I have metal here. I'm going to grab a clean material. Again, if I want to swap this material out we were using, I would use this button. If I want to get a whole new material and play with something new, we're going to use get material. So get material, we're going to get a VRay material. Let me go ahead and apply this to not only this plane, but this plane back here. Remember I was talking about that mirror and mirror thing? I want to show you guys that. Oh, yeah, I want to show you something else too. Name your stuff. MIRROR. This is really important. Make sure you guys are naming your stuff. So if another file goes to another artist, you got a bunch of material number 287. Not a good habit to get in. Name your stuff. Okay, so metal. Metal's diffuse, always black. We're going to get the color of the metal from the reflection color. So let's say a quick and dirty copper. I think it's probably a little too colored, but that's a good enough value. Let's see what we get here. Yeah, let's make this a brighter copper color. So we're getting more. Yep, so that's kind of that. And actually, what we need to do, well, I'm going to unlock the IOR from the value that's down in refraction, since we're not using this area. It's not glass-like, right? I need to unlock it, and we're going to say 20. So that gives us more of the color, the metal look, right? Super reflective. Doesn't look like copper. It looks more like a mirror. It's because glossiness. As artists, we need to break everything up. We need to break up the color of things. We need to break up the reflection, refraction if it has it. We need to break up everything. CG is just too clean. If you guys are going for photorealistic, we want to just constantly be adding detail and wear and things of that nature. So there you go. So it's looking more like kind of like a fuzzy material. Not fuzzy, a rougher kind of metal looking, right? We could add some anisotropy on it, 0.5. You don't really see much of that, probably because of the glossiness. Let's say at a 45. So you can kind of see some of it. It's stretching this color here. What if I was to do like a 0.9? Yeah, 0.7. Okay. So getting more. If you wanted to add more detail, we could add a bump map in here. Oh, shoot, we didn't cover any of this. Okay, we'll go over this too. Actually, we'll go over this right now. So if you wanted to add a bump, you could get more of that brushed look right within that. We'll go over more detail in nodes and procedural textures, advanced procedural textures in part 2. So that's kind of that. Let me go back to 1 here. I'm going to turn off anisotropy and we'll turn off rotation. So here's this mirror and mirror and mirror scenario, this max depth we were talking about, right? So it's going, if I back out, it's going into this metal. Actually, let's make this more clear. Say it's a mirror. Okay, going into this mirror, 1. It's going out to this mirror that's like behind us, 2. Going back in, 3, 4, 5. That's it. That's why we get this black box back here. V-Ray just caps it. Psh, I'm only going to give you 5 reflections. That's all you get. You know, if I kick this up to like 50, ooh, not that big, you're going to get mirror and mirror and mirror and mirror and mirror and mirror and mirror 50 times. You're going to get 25 bounces basically, or 50 bounces, 25 there and backs. Okay, whatever, point taken. We don't always need this. It's sometimes useful. You guys know it's there. You can up the number and see if you like what it does. Sometimes the black in glass or the black in certain things looks nice. Sometimes we need this mirror and mirror and mirror effect. So that's that. So like I think I said before, every time there's a little black or a box here, we can pipe in a map or a texture or a node. Again, more of this will be covered in the advanced materials I'm going to do after this. A quick and dirty explanation, especially for something like glossiness, which is a black and white map, is like, let's say these grunge maps. Let me stop this. And this guy, these grunge maps are awesome. You can Google grunge map. There's a million of them online. This guy, Milos, actually has a Gumroad. Yeah, this guy. I was looking for him earlier. He's got a Gumroad. I'll put a link down if I go to load more. He's got a pack of them for sale. €2. I mean, support the guy. $2. You get a bunch of grunge maps. 6K. I think there's like 20 of them or something like that. Again, but I'll put the link in the description. Otherwise, you can just Google Maps them. If I grab one of these and pipe it into glossiness, if I can get all this on the screen, playing around. Here we go. If I pipe this into glossiness, the black values are going to be not glossy. They're going to be matte. And all the white values are going to be more mirror-like. And you'll see that'll add definition to this. Now, this map, probably a little too much. Let's say if I invert it. So if I go into the map here, and I know if I go back, let's see if I just pull this up, we can look at it. If I know black's going to be matte, not mirror-like, and white is, there's not a lot of white. Let's see if I can invert this. So again, if I go back to glossy map, if I click here, we'll go to output, invert. There you go. That's a little better. So something like dirt, procedural dirt, using maps is a great way to break up, like I talked about, breaking up glossiness, breaking up reflection values. I can also pipe this into the diffuse, the color itself, and that'll give us kind of more detail as well. Still kind of getting away from that mirror, right? Clear that out. Now, here's what I'll get down here. We can also pipe it down into the glossiness section here. So everything with a box, everything with a square that we can pipe something in, there's an area down below that we can pipe this in down here. Now, let's say I want to blend this texture into the material. If I leave this glossiness value at 1, which is like crisp mirror, I can then back this map out. So this map is at 100%. It's overriding that crisp mirror look, the 0.10. So if I say 50%, it gives us 50% of the map and gives us 50% of this gloss value that we've set up here. So this can be anything. This can also be 0.25 or something to that extent. But let's leave it at 1. I can go down again, back it out more. Let's say, let's have it again, 25%. See, so it kind of starts to come through a little bit, gives you a little bit of that detail, but isn't dominating the glossiness. So that's kind of helpful. We can pipe anything in here, and we can change the blend value of anything that's up here. It is also down here. And two, if I pipe something into diffuse, like if I put the diffuse up here, and we'll copy the gloss map into diffuse, and then go back down, you'll see it update in real time. So these are just all maps. Okay, moving on to glass. Let's mess with that a little bit here. All right. So let's grab a brand new material. We'll apply it to all of these guys. These already have a material on them. They're see-through, or the material or the objects are see-through because they have a glass material on them, like we were shown before. The refraction black and white value affects the viewport. Okay, so if I apply this material here, boom, there we go. We get our solid material. Now, again, like metals, we want no diffuse in the glass if we want to see the glass. So that goes black, 100% black. Shoot, another thing I wanted to talk about. If we're doing a color, if we're adding color to something, you're never going to go black or 100% black or 100% white. So if I open this up, we're never going to go to 0 across the board, red, green, blue. We're never going to go to 255 all the way down. It's more apparent in white than it is black. Let's say if I have super white value, that's like 100% white, and then you want a reflection over the top. Let's say a white car. You can't have it at white and then your reflection is at white, because it's white on top of white. You don't see the reflections at all. So this always needs to be down at highest. It needs to be at 225 or 220. And then the same 25 from the very bottom. Now, times I break this rule. I want a tire on a car to be really jet black, but then look really wet. Like, the stuff we put on our tire when we clean our tire. So I will literally do something like 333. It's not physically accurate. Does it look cool? Heck yeah, it looks great. I don't like it when it's like 25. Like, that doesn't look like a tire to me. So there are times we can break this rule. Another time I break this rule, I'll do 0, 0, 0 when I do people in a scene. It doesn't absorb light information. As you can see, it's a black hole basically. So if I want a bunch of silhouettes in a scene, and I don't want them just distracting from design, I'll turn it all black like that. But yeah, some of these rules you guys are going to learn and have to make judgment calls as an artist to get where you want the image to be. So glass, that's the time we can't break that. We need to be all at zeros for that. Reflect. Let's put a little reflect on that. So you see that coming through nice, right? And then refract. I'll kick this up. There you go. Got a nice little glass material, right? And let's cover more of this stuff. Again, if you want to do color, don't do it in this refract. I would use this as how easily can you see through the material. And then like if I kick this down halfway, maybe a little more. See how it kind of looks like a tinted window at that point? But then, again, if you're going to add color, just use fog color. So if I was to go green, let's say like an aqua blue. Yeah. That's kind of cute. Oh yeah, 2, remember, don't want to have this value all the way up to 255. So then that kind of gives us like a real light, let's say 2. A real light hue, right? That's kind of cool. The fog multiplier we were talking about, if I kick that up to like 10, boom, gets real dark, right? So, oh yeah. I wanted to show you the fog bias. So let's get in here. Well, let's get my camera in there because that's going to keep the exposure. So look at the stem here. Where it thins out, it's going to get lighter in color. So if I go to 1, right? So it's this clamping. It's like pushing the color out from the thin part and then crunching it back in with the fog multiplier to the thick part. So if I go up again to 10, if I go up to, let's just kick it up to 2, So I'm crunching, I'm like pushing it in. So we're getting darker values in the thicker parts. This is a solid object. Oh, I need to talk about something else too. This is a solid object. And I'll explain why it's a solid object, or why V-Ray sees it as a solid object. But then when we up the fog bias in the thin parts, we're going to get less color. You can see through it a little better. This is really apparent in something like a wine glass where the stem's real clear, but then as you get to the base of the wine glass, it gets darker around the lip as the glass gets thicker. So let's talk about glass and how V-Ray sees glass for a second. If I go to a plane, and I just knock a plane out, and let's just say 90, oops, 90. There we go. Yeah, this looks funny. And let's actually kick this over to us here. And I apply this glass material to it. V-Ray needs, back that up, ray tracing engines need two sides to cut through to tell the render engine, this is the front part of the glass, this is the back part of the glass. Again, if we're going to use the reflect on backside, you need a physical backside, not the backside of a plane. So if I pull this up, we applied the glass material to it because we can see the little dog ears are filled in, and I do this. This plane doesn't have two sides. It has a backside, but it's not a back physical side. It needs to be shelled. There needs to be thickness. So what happens is the ray hits the front of this piece of glass and then doesn't know what else to do because it doesn't have a backside. So if I shell this, there you go. When I shell it, then it looks like glass, right? So I see this as most apparent when I buy cars for some of the auto brands I do work for. Not to drop any names, but I buy a car, I get it, glass looks weird, looks terrible. It's like refracting weird random things. If you go in, a lot of nine times out of 10, an artist didn't shell the glass. It's just a plane. So then you go in and just toss a shell modifier on it. Like if I kick this off again, see, like you get the reflection, you don't get the refraction. If I kick that back on, back to that. So that's part of that drawing I cleared. You always need to have a front side and a back side. If you want it to be a thin piece of glass, you need to shell it. If it's going to be a thick piece of glass, you don't need to shell it. You still need a backside. So a good example of that is these guys. If you look, let's see if I turn off the turbo smooth. Yeah, these aren't two-sided. Like this is the front side. If I explain this visually, this is the front side. And then this guy over here, this guy back here is the back side. So it's looking at this as one solid, like a top kind of spinning top, one solid piece of glass. And that's how this index of refraction plays into that basically. So again, just be cognizant. You need a front and a back side for all pieces of glass. You can't just use a plane. What else? Oh yeah, this thing I can't pronounce. Your Abe number. I don't know what it's stuff. I just know what it does. Okay, let's turn this back on. Oh yeah, it was the Taurus knot that I liked. That looked really cool. Okay, turn that back on. Again, lower the number, the less realistic it is, but the more the color shows up. Why? I don't know. Sometimes I just use random values. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I wish I could just give you a magic number. Let's see if I can zoom in here a little more. See this color. Let's do 25 because it'll be, or like 10, be more apparent. Again, the lower number renders quicker, but it's less accurate from what V-Ray says. To see that in the refraction, not reflection, we get this cool, glass color breakdown, Pink Floyd kind of thing going on. Just cool. Okay, max depth. So again, like refractions, it'll just stop after it gets through so many walls like we talked about. So if I crank this to 50, you're going to get more detail to turn this off. It's going to start going through more of these. You're going to start seeing through more of these. Which can add more detail. Again, it can look funny at times too. So it could, again, be physically accurate, but maybe it doesn't look good. So it's something that you just need to play with. I just want you guys to be aware of where that is. So in case like in the mirror thing, you know, like it just stops at black. Why the heck is it stopping at black? This is the same effect. If I was to go to 1, yeah, like we just don't get, like it doesn't see this through this. It's hitting the front side of this, not the back side, and not going through the back side. So it hits the front side and goes, well, that's it. That's all the info I'm going to give you. So 2, we're getting more information. We're starting to see this black. Again, this is like in the mirror. It's dead, not dead information, but could be parts in the scene. It could also just be that it's cutting us off. 10. Yeah, see, so more and more detail we're going to get at the expense of render times. So just be careful with that. Effect shadow. Okay, let's change this to a color. This will be more apparent. Now we're going to do it in the fog. I don't want to set bad examples for you guys. Let's go to 1. We're going to go back to defaults. So just here, effect shadow gives you red, right? So this light, real bright, giving us red on the ground. This is okay. Let me back up. This should be checked if you're not using caustics. If you're using caustics, this needs to be turned off. Caustics will help show this information. And actually, let me see if I can do this real quick without getting it to crash on me. Caustics is a whole nother video we'll cover, you guys. I just want to show you, I don't know, one time I swear I sat for like an hour and a half, 2 hours trying to figure out why the heck my material wasn't showing caustics. And again, if this is on, it doesn't let you calculate caustics. So I had this whole caustic scene set up looking cool, hit render, it won't show me caustics. So if I turn this off and we hit, I'm actually going to do render. What it does is during rendering time, it'll calculate this caustics map. Again, I probably should not be getting into this, but I just want to show you guys the difference. Save you guys some time if possible. So unchecked, we can use caustics. We get some caustics on the ground. It's that, again, that Pink Floyd kind of thing that shows, shoots off color. This will show us, and it looks like crap because it's not set up, but you get this like, yeah, light going through glass and how it reflects like beautifully, like a stained glass window kind of would to some extent. Sorry about that, hit the unrecord button. If we're not using caustics, and we turn this off so we don't go back to that, you can just leave this on. It looks cool, it looks great. It's not like super physically accurate. You don't get that cool dancing of light that happens as it goes through a solid glass object, but pretty enough, right? Yeah, and then the alpha channels itself, we kind of already covered that. Translucency. Let's look at this wax thing here. Go back to IPR so I don't cancel my recording like I did a second ago. So this was this example. Okay, the refraction, I'm sorry, subsurface scattering. This is not the thing that is down here. This is not this translucency. This is actually the AL shader, surface shader. Let me show you guys. If I was to grab a new material, I can just replace this one. The AL surface material. There's also fast SS2. This is a whole nother video in itself because these get pretty complicated. But see how it's taking in the light and it kind of dies over time? This is gorgeous. Let me show you what translucency does, this other option. So this guy was already set up. We'll apply it. It's on a hard wax. Maybe it's I'm ignorant. Maybe there's just better options, so I never took the time to learn or use this thing. I don't know, you guys. I said it in my other video. It's jank. It looks jank. It doesn't look good. I've never been able to make it look good. So, I don't know. If you guys can figure it out, you guys want to figure it out, I've always just gone with a subsurface scattering shader, like the AL shader, or prior to that, the fast SSS2. So that's that. Again, I'll go over the subsurface scattering material. We can do that in another course because, I mean, it just looks so good. It looks cool. It looks great. See how it's soaking up that light. You can control the colors and all this stuff too. So craziness. And then last but not least, our tree remember I was talking about opacity settings? So I got a little shot set up. This leaf here, if I go into it, I don't want to get into the crazinesses of it because this is a more complex shader. We have our opacity map, right? So white is going to show the leaf. Everything black is going to cut it out of the geometry like an opacity map does. So going to the render options here, this is set to normal. So again, normal renders the best, but it takes the longest. Clip is the jank, quick and dirty way. Actually, I don't want to call it jank. If you got a ton of trees, clip might be great. If you're far away, clip might be a quick way to get renders out. I guess a way to get renders out faster. Again, VRay says that clip leaves a black kind of edge around the leaf itself for some reason, the reason it clips it out. But I'll show you. I've noticed it doesn't. I don't know if VRay's improved on itself or something. And then this stochastic, I don't know how to say that. That's kind of the middle ground. It is the best of both worlds. Doesn't take super long like normal, isn't jank, or not jank, isn't fast, efficient like clip is. But I'll show you guys these to you. I don't notice a difference between them, so maybe I should be using clip all the time. Showing you guys this and doing some test renders and things kind of introduced me to those clip modes, and maybe we can use something that's a little more efficient. So this is kind of the middle of the ground, the stock clipping mode. It's a clip, is what it is. When I choose or switch it to the more efficient one, I don't get a black edge. So again, this was saying maybe I should be using that guy. Options, we have options, and then normal. Normal looks the best. It's kind of could be blurred from what VRay says a little bit, softened. I guess it's not such a hard edge, but takes the longest to render. So be careful of that. But that's kind of as far as I'm going to take this tutorial. I think we're already almost close to an hour. Appreciate you guys for watching. Appreciate you guys for liking and subscribing and commenting. Please also do share if you guys have pages that you're a part of. I'd love to try to help get this stuff out to artists that are learning and growing, and maybe there's 45 minutes of crap you already know, and then hey, there's one little thing in here that you guys have learned that'll make your workflow a little easier. So please like, please subscribe, comment if you have options or something you want me to consider for a video. I want to create stuff that you guys want to see. I think that's why I kind of moved in this direction with materials. I want to get into advanced materials, advanced procedural materials for you guys, because I feel like there's some gems there that you could appreciate. But thanks you guys for watching. I wouldn't be here without you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.